What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Couple Things
with Shawn and Andrew,
a podcast all about couples and the things they go through.
Today we have a real treat. We sit down with Steve and Linda Znachko. Fun fact, I grew up in the same part of town as Steve and Linda did, and we kind of intersected a couple times throughout life, but I'd always known about the amazing things and the amazing projects and the amazing missions that Steve and Linda were always up to, but didn't really dive into it deep like we did until this conversation that we had with them.
It's one of my favorite interviews we have had yet on this podcast. I feel like I could have talked to them for literally 10 hours. Get ready to learn a lot about relationships, how you can, like things you can work on in your relationship, how you can make your relationship stronger. But also get your Kleenex ready, because hearing about their personal charity and mission called He Knows Your Name is one of the most beautiful programs I've ever heard about.
Just a quick synopsis on He Knows Your Name as an organization. They actually adopt babies who have recently passed away and don't have a name or weren't claimed at death, and adopt them to give them names and a proper burial, which I think is so cool and can make such a difference in the legacy of a family. It just gives me chills to talk about.
Yes, and they go on to talk about how every baby, even after they have passed away, should know that there is someone on earth who loves them, who's, thinking about them and who misses them. And it's just incredible to hear some of these stories, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear them as well.
So what impresses me about Steve and Linda is they're extremely thoughtful in their relationship. They actually teach a marriage course, which we'll link down below. But they're both super ambitious people, and they talk about how they support each other in those ambitions with different things like cap salary or structured time. And they just go about things so very well. And I'm glad we had this conversation. I hope you guys find value in it as well. Excited to hear your feedback. Before we jump into it, though, please give the show a rating and subscribe to it on whatever platform you're listening to. That really helps us out. And can't wait for this one with Steve and Linda. Let's just jump into it. Steve and Linda, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's really an honor to have you. When I think of couples that I admire and look up to, you are among the first that come to mind. Just in as much as you guys think about how you've done marriage, the problems that you've encountered. And I'm really excited to dive into this conversation because I think there's a ton of good wisdom to share. Additionally, you kind of know a little bit about Shawn and I and our background. You were at our wedding.
I know. It was so great to come to Nashville and see you get married.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to structure the conversation around the marriage encounter topics in the series that you guys host that helps younger couples.
Yeah.
And there are 5 kind of segments to that. Communication, leaving and cleaving, finances, the physical aspect, and then the mission and spiritual gifting of that. If we could just start with the communication aspect of it, because I think that's
very important. Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, we would say, we were talking about this morning, is the communication is an umbrella over all the other topics. Everything is about communication. I would say that, Lynn and I would say that the best thing that we've done is that we talk about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, everything.
A lot.
And that's even been one of the tension points at some point is, when do we talk about it and when do we leave it go? Because I'm kind of the one to press us into saying, hey, how are we doing? And
that's me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And we're also finding that it's not driven by gender. There's just usually somebody that is the communicator, and there's somebody that just says, can we just back off and let it go for a while?
That's Andrew.
Exactly.
And I'm like, no, but we didn't finish it.
Exactly.
It doesn't feel like it's fixed. So we got to keep going.
So even that, and we'll be
good.
skipping all over the place in this, but even that, like, we inserted language to be able to say, okay, when do we press in and when do we do strategic retreat? Because like, even Shawn, for you to say, it's very frustrating for somebody to want to press in, like to feel that there's something missing. And when your partner says, I don't want to go into that right now. If you leave it there, we found that leaves a lot of tension, because it leaves me saying, okay, we're unfinished and we don't have a resolution and we don't have anything on the grid. But we found out that if we say, okay, we're going to press into it, but Linda says, not now, then it's up to her to say then, but I will come back to you and say, we will do it.
Yeah. So it's my responsibility to do that part.
And that gives me peace to say, okay, we haven't just shelved it. We've just said, this is not a good time, which I can live with, but you've acknowledged it is something we need to talk about. And just inserting strategic retreat was really good because I felt like I'm chasing. She's running.
Yeah.
And
well, I was gonna say, it doesn't leave it feeling like it's just on you.
Right.
Because I feel like sometimes when someone will say, just not now, then it's like, oh, well, yes, I'm the only one who wants to fight,
exactly
fight it out.
And we've said in some of our discussions is saying, okay, this is another communication thing. Does just not now sometimes mean never?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we
and I are the same.
Exactly.
And really seriously, I'm not a big Enneagram person, but I am a 9. And so I hate conflict more than anything in life. And so I have had to really work through that it's not always conflict, but which is terrible, but it's an opportunity to go deeper. And I've had to retrain myself so that I can look at these things and say, when I'm saying to Steve, and as an introvert too, not now, then what I have to say is then when, so that I'm giving him what he needs in that. And I'm then being responsible to be the one to come back so that it is a partnership, because otherwise, like he said, he's left pursuing. And I'm just getting more and more running the other way. Yeah. So it's developing that trust between us to believe each other when we say, not now, it's okay.
And part of the encounter is to just give ourselves language. I mean, we're sharing something that I don't know, maybe it took 10 years into our marriage before we discovered. And so it's not like we just said, oh, the first time this happened, we go, oh, here's what we have to do. A part of the reason for the marriage encounter is we spent years and years sometimes with frustration.
Sure.
With not having language for what rut were we in. And when we could name it and we had identified it, then we had some tools to work out of it. So our whole encounter is about opening our journals. It's not a biblical study, although it's all biblically guided.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can I ask you guys this? Because Shawn and I have discussed this. Even the core essence of this show is to discuss and analyze how Shawn and I do relationships and analyze how other people do relationships. And we've had the conversation that, is it unhealthy to a certain extent to really dig all the way down deep or revisit some skeletons in the closet? And it's we've always prided ourselves on we call it transparency. That was in 2013 when we started dating, it was just full honesty.
Yeah.
And
then it's but is there a limit to that? Or should some things not be revisited? Have you guys experienced this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think honestly only you know that. And I think that's where, like Steve just was starting to refer to, the biblical principles of marriage and how much do you find in the Bible about marriage? You're not going to go to communication in marriage and find a great passage on it. But I think the walking with the Holy Spirit is super key to this, because I think there's seasons for full disclosure, maybe depending on just what you're going through and growing through personally, and then maritally, and then you're raising children and things come up, layers and layers of things come up. You start raising your child and you're like, wow, when I was 9, I really struggled with XYZ and it's really coming up in me. And I haven't really talked to you about this, And so there's places and times for it, but I believe that that's where we walk with the Holy Spirit in marriage, and it's that 3 cords braided together that is really important to say, have I really gone to God on this? And is he prompting me to go deeper with him, first of all, and then with my mate in this?
And we also, another discovery we had is there's a difference between being forgiving each other and being reconciled with each other. And this is another key that we found. So if I do something to offend Linda, oftentimes she would forgive me, but we weren't fully reconciled because it leaves the question of, is it going to happen again? Okay, does that make sense? So forgiveness goes one way, but reconciliation is when you've worked through something And that's when you may decide, okay, we're done with this. We don't need to revisit it. And we have some topics in our marriage where we've said, okay, we've not dug all the way down, but we are reconciled. We have decided that together we trust in one another in this, and this is the way it's going to be. But leaving it one way is just a tension point, because it's like you're sitting with your spouse that you love, but you're afraid that hurt is going to happen again. And so if you haven't reconciled it, you start to withhold a little bit, because you say, if I move into that again, the pattern's going to happen again. And the illustration we use is like, if I give Andrew, if I give you $1,000 and you're going to pay it back, and you don't pay it back. Okay. And then eventually I come to you and you say, man, I never said I was going to pay it back. That's just, you gave that to me. Eventually I go, okay, I forgive that $1,000. Yeah. But when you come to me again and say, can I have another $1,000? I'm going to say no, because I don't trust you.
Right.
I don't trust. See, so I've forgiven you, but we're not reconciled. But when you come back and say, hey, Steve, I borrowed that first $1,000. I blew it. I lied. I did this. I'm ready to change. And I believe that. Now we're reconciled, and I will trust you again with another $1,000. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing you talk about is, I think, in your relationship with your dad, he lacked giving specifics for what he was wanting to reconcile or get forgiven on. Yeah. And that struck me, because in our marriage, like, I don't want to compromise any of those trust tokens that I have, if that's how we're like viewing them. Sure. And so, like, I want everything to be forgiven, instead of just forgiven is like I'll give you $1,000 again. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
No, that's reconciled.
That's reconciled.
See, now I got to learn all this language.
Yeah.
Gotta get onboarded.
But let me just pause 1 second and say, when you just said learn the language, because that is the whole point of the communication thing. Yeah. Like, getting a language for some of these things is what helps you communicate better and helps you understand one another better. And it helps kind of like hit it at the pass, so that you're using language that you both have agreed to, that makes sense for you. And you could even say to each other, like, okay, are we at forgiveness or are we at reconciliation? Right. And how much conversation would that eliminate if you could just get there and then move on?
And you may insert a strategic retreat there that says, we're forgiveness, which is great. We're at peace. We're not reconciled.
But we'll need to talk about it.
And let's revisit that another time, because at least we're at peace. But to mention what my dad did, which was such a wonderful thing, is my dad struggled with alcoholism. And so the first thing that you do is your 12-step program. And it says in that list, go and say you're sorry. Go apologize to the people. So he did that. Awesome. But I was sitting there saying, I think some of the stuff that happened is going to happen again. And so I didn't understand. I kept distance from him. And it wasn't his fault. I just didn't fully believe or understood that he really understood how it had hurt me. So then about 4 or 5 years later, he just did a wonderful thing to me. He called me into his office and he said, I did this in this trip, this and this trip, this and this meeting. Whoa. And I was like, flooded over me, where I was like, oh, Dad, I know you love me. Now I know what you did.
Yeah.
And you know what you did.
And you know, and you won't do it again. And so that was what reconciled us. So now the gap was closed. And I can tell you, probably between the two of you, Linda runs to forgiveness very quickly because she doesn't want conflict. So one of the struggles we have is Linda's like, I'm saying I'm sorry, and I'm saying I'm not sure you're the one who should be saying you're sorry. It might be me. and she's just like, I just want this over. I'll apologize for anything. And I'm like, but then we'll just repeat it. And that's where we inserted saying, honey, don't apologize too quickly. Yeah. Because it might be me, and we won't be reconciled just by saying I'm sorry.
So the thoughtfulness, and actually, I think in my experience, the difficult parts in our 4 years of marriage, like the hardest thing is just the self-awareness and like this introspection of like, oh, how are my actions affecting Shawn? Yes. Why am I making her feel that way? And I think that's why I'm more prone to like a strategic retreat, because sometimes like I'm just not that smart of a guy.
Yeah.
So she's like, well, why'd you do that? And I'm like, I got nothing for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I just got to let me think about it.
And then I pry even more. I'm like, okay, so what caused you to think that you don't know what you're doing?
Exactly.
Was it your mom? Was it your dad?
I'm holding the shoe.
So good.
Get out of here.
That's so good.
You
That's so good. It's so good.
But one kind of phrase that you have mentioned in your series that I think is just so amazing of a perspective to hold is you reminding each other like, hey, we know how this ends.
Right.
We know how this ends. And that's us remaining married, us loving each other. And it's like it's so powerful because at some point your mind tricks you and like, oh, well, maybe this does.
For sure.
Right.
For sure. Oh, I mean, the way we live in a culture that tells us we have options, right? So that's always there. And we have an enemy that's always trying to destroy, kill, and rob our marriage of everything. And then we have our own selfishness that just wants to battle those things. So for me too, because it gets hard, I go there quicker. And and so when Steve just enters in with that truth, like we know how this ends, and we kind of go through the truth of that. It settles us down so much. It really cuts the emotion in half too.
Wow.
So that is a huge thing because I'll just start to get emotional, and that's not going to take us where we need to go for sure.
And it's a choice because we have seen, and you guys, again, this is something that we just inserted our marriage. That's phrase.
Probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, probably 10 years ago. So we've been at this 38 years. So 10 years ago, we realized we still were surprised at how angry we would get with one another.
Yeah.
And the evil thoughts that would enter our mind, where you actually you're so angry, you start saying, this has never been right. You have never understood me, never, always.
Right.
And it was just like this thing. And I believe that is where the evil one just comes in and says, and starts whispering and saying, you were never meant for each other. This has been a mistake all along. And just this one time, now you can imagine, you guys know what it's like. And in the middle of this, you say, okay, because you don't wait till you feel it. I said, honey, can we just skip to the end? Because we know how this ends.
Yeah.
And it goes something like this. It's not this sweet, it's just kind of like, we're going to be married. We're going to make love soon. And we're going to be laughing again.
Yes.
And you look at each other and you go, that is the truth.
Right.
It doesn't fix everything, but it lets all the air out of the balloon to stop the rage, because the rage gets damaging, and we've all said stuff. And all of a sudden, we just found this pressure release valve. One funny story from our encounter. One couple said they used
oh my gosh, there's hilarious too.
There's just hilarious stories. And the husband called me and said, yeah, so we were in a really bad fight. And I said, honey, we know how this ends. And she says, yes, with you dead on the floor in front of me.
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you do this couple, they're the sweetest couple in the world. And only she could pull that off.
Yeah. But to me, it was like, they got it because the humor actually completely diffused the rage,
so
you know? And I thought, oh, that's exactly it. Like you can go to humor, but it's getting that emotion cut off, you know, so that your mind isn't thinking like all those things and destroying you.
Just lies.
well, I feel like we get messages literally every day from people saying, I got in this argument with my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my husband or my wife, and I just don't know if I can do it anymore. And I feel like you said, in society, we have, it's just ingrained in us to think, oh, well, we're arguing a lot. Maybe it wasn't the right person.
Right.
Sure.
Whereas if you go into the conversation with, this is my person.
Right.
We have to figure it out. I think it changes. But we get, I swear we get questions every day of, how do I know when it's time to
Linda
call it a quit?
Absolutely. Linda inserted something early on in our marriage that I just think you're onto something. And Linda, you want to share, even around our family, about that, what's not an option.
Yeah, so just saying divorce is not an option. And, you know, we get married and we do it in front of a bunch of witnesses and we basically are saying, you know, we're doing this for life, right? But then we get into it and we think we have options and the world tells us we have options. And really, like, saying to one another, divorce is not an option, and reminding each other that that's where we're living and that's where we're coming from, and then going to our children and telling them that it's not an option. So, you're living with these people that grow up with you in your home, and they see it all and hear it all. And our kids have seen us be really ugly with each other. And yet for them to have that same thing going in their head that, well, they told me divorce isn't an option, so I don't even have to go there and worry about that. And just the comfort that brought them.
I was gonna say, do you remember our premarital counselor, what he said?
No, I don't like how you put me on the spot like that.
No, he calls it the D word, and you're never supposed to say the D word.
Yeah, which is really good.
We never have, which is awesome.
Which is awesome. It just should never be a threat. It should never even be it's not even just an option. It should never be a threat. It should never, those are kind of things that take off the table. And even with Drew, to be able to commit in front of your children, to be able to say, it gives them peace. Because they're going to see a fight and they need peace, and just go, all I know is this ends with them together.
Yeah.
They need to know it.
Yeah.
It is just thinking about the certainty of, we know how this ends, especially in, this is summer 2020.
Yeah.
Hardest year.
Yes.
I have never felt like this weird, I'm not like wildly anxious, but there's so much volatility of like, well, are we still going to have a job? Can we buy toilet paper?
Right.
The certainty of we're going to be married.
Right.
Is so amazing. And there's a series of choices that go into making that the final destination. And you guys, if you guys talk about how marriage doesn't burst, it slow leaks.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we feel like we've talked to so many couples who present a situation, kind of what you're saying, Shawn, about they kind of give you the scenario that they're in right now, and that becomes very inflamed and like the main thing. And we've talked to so many people who they think it's the affair or the this or that, they name it. And when you really go back and you take that thread and you follow it all the way back, you're like, no, this has been a slow leak for quite a while. And we would say, that starts with communication. Like if communication's not there, that is really a huge part of the slow leak, because it does, like Steve said, enter into every aspect. We talk about finances, we talk about sex, we talk about our in-laws, we talk about Steve's job, we talk about our ministries and what God is doing in our lives and church life and friends, and we talk about it all. And if we weren't, it would touch every one of those topics. And so the slow leak would be, something that just one day, then it's a burst at the end, but it's not all of a sudden a burst.
Yeah. I had a guy, I didn't even know that well. A wife asked me to meet with her husband who had an affair, and I just sat down with him, and we had a series of 8 breakfasts. And the first time he sat with me, and he said, he was so emphatic. He was like, Steve, I'm telling you, God promised that he'd never give me more than I could be tempted, and I'm telling you, it happened like that. He said, it did not work. I was there. I was not looking for it. We met 7 more times. At the end of the last time, he looked at me and he goes, this didn't start with the affair. This started 8 years ago when we stopped talking. And it was his realization that that's the slow leak. And every time you leave that topic uncovered, it becomes a separation point. And if you leave it uncovered too long, it stays a separation point. Yeah. And one of the things that we've, another illustration is just to be able to say, if we try to say to marriages, Linda's dad had a heart attack one time, and I called a good friend of mine, John Ish, who was a heart surgeon. I said, hey, how bad is it? And he said, well, the heart's a muscle. And he said, if the blood flow has been cut off only a short time, you restore the blood flow, the heart will come back fully. But if blood flow has been cut off for too long to a certain part of the heart, that part of the heart will never come back. And we have seen the truth that if you cut off blood flow to a certain part of your marriage, there is a time where it's awful difficult and maybe impossible to revive that part. And that's why we say, that's why we're so forward thinking, is that we have seen tragically marriages that all of a sudden wake up and say, I can't even remember what I loved about that person. I can't remember the last time we laughed together. I can't remember. That didn't happen overnight. That is a slow leak that happened over years, and it's an unfestered, it's a wound that was never covered, and then it goes to another one, and then it causes separation. And you'll know that what is growing in our marriage is our intimacy, and intimacy and union is everywhere and it impacts every part of your marriage. And if you're starting to break that union, it just starts to dissipate everything, your physical life, your spiritual life, everything. And you start to look at each other and say, I'm living with a stranger.
Yeah. How sad. Yeah. I mean, then you get to our stage of life as empty nesters, you know, which a lot of our friends do.
Yeah.
They wake up one day and the kids are gone. The house is quiet and they go to eat dinner together and they're like,
We don't have anything to talk about.
You can't just all of a sudden start talking really one day and be like, we haven't talked for decades. You know, where do you start? You've missed so much. And that's the slow leak of it, you know, decades of slow leaking that you just go wake up one day and say, we're not even friends anymore.
This is a really dangerous conversation. I feel like we could be here for the next 3 days.
Well,
I'm like,
Well,
oh
we have
my
to remember
gosh.
the encounter is 5 sessions, an hour and a half each,
Yeah.
with an hour of sharing afterwards. So we're touching on stuff, but again, our hope is to give language, and then we can go, because it's just so hopeful to know someone else has been there, and that you can look at each other and say, we're not broken. We are meant for each other. Other people have been through it, and not only did we do okay, we thrived.
Right.
And so a part of our message is just hope. Marriage is awesome.
Well, and I think, and for us just doing Encounter in community, we
Yeah.
realize we're not alone and we're all in this together. And I think isolation is another big attack on marriages. You know, you think it's only happening in your home and no one should know this. And when we get inside a room and we all talk about these things and then we do it together, it gives everyone a language. And we realize too, we've said in our church, you know, so when you're working alongside someone in Antioch Kids, or you're on the greeting team and you can say to that person you were in marriage encounter with, you know, like, I just don't feel reconciled with my husband over XYZ. Like you're forming relationships with a community that's for you. And I think that's a really important part of support for marriages, that we each know how together to do this. And we're all aiming for the same thing.
The alternative to that is you could still find community, but people who are kind of just drawn to the drama of like, oh my, I can't believe they just side with you, and they're just like yes men of like, yeah, you have to, you know, be angry and upset about that. And that's a dangerous place to be. So it's got to be they're supportive of you both.
Totally. And like there's times where I get called, you know, will you meet with me? And I'm like, I'll meet with you once, and then we're all meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it can't be one-sided. But I was going to say, we were talking about peer pressure of our generation and social media and everything. People are so afraid to show that relationships aren't perfect.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And the funny joke that we always share is we got engaged, and a close friend of mine, we're going on a walk. I'm asking her for advice because she's been married a few years. And I said, well, what's the hardest thing about being married? You know, and do you fight? Do you argue? Like, what do I need to like prepare myself for? Pretty much. And she's like, marriage is great. I've never fought. It's just, and I just, it's such a defeating thing to go on social media and see all these perfect relationships, because at home, you then tell yourself, oh, I don't have that, but other people do. So I must be doing something wrong.
And Shawn, I think that is exactly the reason we did this, was exactly that reason. And we have had couples in tears just saying, we're just so glad we're not the only ones, because we're all presenting. It's kind of like the whole image thing we're presenting. Well, I'll help you out. Next time we're arguing, I'll put us on speakerphone, call you. It'll make you feel a lot better.
Yeah.
And that's really why we don't call this a curriculum.
Yeah.
We say we're opening our journals. We're inviting you in to just see our life and be honest. And when we do this at church, like Steve said, those 5 weeks, we also make it mandatory that the couples go on a date for an hour and a half afterwards, so that they leave the hour and a half time with homework, have these conversations about these topics, and ask each other these questions, and kind of start that ball rolling, so that they can practice kind of what they've just learned. And that's another big
and truthfully,
step.
we opened a can of worms sometimes. Is that we'd be in that hour and a half session, and the couple, you should see the sessions. You can look out, we're sharing, and people are looking at each other and they're going, and if you send them back in to parenting business, they will never talk about what that just happened. And all we've done is open up a can of wounds. And and it just got worse.
Yeah.
So the hour after to hour and a half afterward is to say, okay, those looks that you just had,
Yeah, you have to talk about
you
it.
got to talk about it before you get back into life. Otherwise, you're just going to go right back to it. So we learned the hard way of saying, but then it goes back to what do we have to do? Communicate. And that's where that budgeting term, I think you mentioned, we budget everything in our marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, everything. And that sounds so clinical.
Yeah. So boring.
And but it's not clinical at all.
Right.
It's just the term covers what we needed to do and what we found out was missing. And man, when we just looked and said, are we shooting for the same topic? Have we agreed where we're headed? Have we agreed about what we want? Because we just found out we were fighting so much over, because Linda was headed here, I was headed here, and we couldn't figure out why we're fighting. It's like, well, until we figure out unified, what are we after?
Yeah.
So anyway.
So for those listening, and we'll link the whole marriage encounter series in the description, but Steve and Linda use a term called budgeting, and I think it originated with the finances.
It originated with finances.
Where you were walking through like, hey, this is our monthly budget, and why'd you overspend here? And he realized that it was because Linda actually never signed off on the budget itself. So they were never on the same page, never had a chance. Are you laughing? Because
I have to tell the credit card story.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to tell it. So, funny situation about budgeting. We are getting more unified in everything, and we're still working on it. Sure. But Andrew walks in one day, just cold, like no communication has ever been had about budgeting. And he's like, I'm cutting up our credit cards. And I was like, oh, okay. Let's take a step back. What's going on? He's like, you're only allowed to pay in cash from now on. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Ramsey.
Exactly.
And I got defensive and stubborn, obviously. Yeah. And I was like, you mean to tell me if I go to the grocery store, I'm going to have to go to the bank. I'm going to have to get out cash. I'm going to have to go from the bank to the grocery store. And if I don't have enough cash, I'm going to have to go back to the bank. And he's like, yeah. And I just...
So now we have 40 credit cards. That's how we compromise that one.
Exactly.
But doing that not just with finances, but actually getting together and getting on the same page of, hey, this is where we want our career to go. This is where we want our service and missions to go. And I'll use that as a transition. A big part of communication is understanding what the other is called to. And a second of the 5 kind of segments that you guys talk about in marriage are your spiritual gifts and your missions. And I know you guys just had a huge Zoom call on Friday. Is that right? With if you could talk about that.
Yeah. So we, through my ministry, He Knows Your Name, I got a call about a baby that was really critically ill in the NICU at our children's hospital in Indianapolis. And we found out that this child was up for adoption, but was basically so critically ill, was not going to survive even the next week. And they needed someone to make medical decisions for the baby. And because the ministry I have takes care of children in death and gives them honor and dignity, when I got the call, that's where I thought this conversation was going. And when I realized they were asking me to consider taking care of the baby in life so that we could be with this child in this fragile state, it was just like, it was just so beautiful, because when I told Steve about it, he said, I got on the phone with him and he said, I'm going with you. You're not going to do this alone. And that partnership and friendship in our marriage just came right into my ministry life. And it became a partnership and something we did together, which then ended up being final on Friday, that we adopted Abigail, Elise, together and brought her in to our family. And that whole process that's been 4 months long was something that, God continues to take the kingdom work we're both doing, which is very separate in some ways, and brings it together and makes it something we're doing together in marriage. And it has just been such a blessing for us to experience so many different things. But we had never done anything like that before.
I would love for you to speak more about He Knows Your Name. From an outsider's perspective, they could look and say, well, she was 3 months old. Like, why put so much effort and time into legally adopting this child? Why is that important to you guys?
Well, Abigail, it's about changing the narrative of a life, because Abigail's mom left her, abandoned her, and so there's a little baby left to die, basically, without any claim, without any name. The name on her door was Bufa, baby up for adoption, instead of being called by name. And so we get a chance to come in and hold her, and we worshiped with her, and we baptized her, and we held her as she died. So we had 24 hours with her. And what we feel like is it's a kingdom opportunity, because the whole narrative changed in the hospital.
Right.
When we walked in, you guys, the receptionist said, "We've been waiting for you," because everybody in the hospital knew that there's this abandoned baby that had no claim, and all of a sudden two people come, which we believe is a representation of the kingdom, and say, "We'll step in." And so we loved her. We fell in love with her for that 24 hours. It's amazing how God gave us a heart for her. She was beautiful on the outside. She looked perfect. And so we held her as she died. And so the adoption was the finish of the narrative. The narrative over her life was abandoned, nobody wants you, to now not only do we want you, we're going to fight for you, we're going to go to court for you, and now you have a legacy. And so now she carries a legacy for her life. And the beautiful part about Abigail is, if you were there at the funeral, is so she was abandoned, but in her funeral 130 people showed up. She had a police escort or a mercy escort down the highway to her funeral. She was a celebrated daughter of the king, so her story went from abandonment to a community claiming her and mourning her. And we just talked to our youngest daughter and our other kids, and we have another person. So it's dignity and affirmation that every life matters to God. So Linda's stepping into death all the time and putting dignity on a name that otherwise people look at and say, well, why did that baby live? I think it's really good, like Amelia.
Right. I've claimed 24 babies in death that have been abandoned at either a coroner's office or a hospital or outside. But this call with Abigail was so different because she was alive. So she was born on February 8th. We got the call on February 7th, and we were with her from February 7th to February 8th. So the 3 months was from the time she died to the whole process of adoption. But we didn't have that idea. We didn't know it was even a possibility. The adoption attorney called us and said, would you like to formally adopt her? Because all we really had time for in the hospital in that 24 hours was to do legal guardianship, which gave us all the authority we needed to do the medical care and decision making over her life at that point into her dying. And so we were like, yes, I mean, if we could claim her, not just in death, but adopt her in life, like you talk, like Steve's saying, change the narrative over this. She had injustice all over her because of her situation. And she was alone and unnamed. And so now she's named and claimed, and she will have a headstone that has our name on it. She will have her birth and death certificate with our name on it. And she's forever grafted into our family. And really our legacy is hers and her legacy is ours now. And it's just so beautiful. But like I said, it's just like nothing we've ever done before.
And as a couple, you know, what we have is, so Lynn and I have very different ministry. I pastor over in Ukraine, and so I go there 3 times a year. She's doing this, and they're very, very separate. But we're united in our bedroom talking about our kingdom lives all the time. A biggest part of our intimacy is that we actually don't share a lot of ministry where we're actually side by side doing it, other than our church, of course, is. But I go to some hard parts of the world. She's going here to the graveside. But when we come back together, we're just sharing what God's doing. And that's the spiritual unity that creates an intimacy that I think a lot of couples are missing, to be able to see unified and say, oh, let me tell you what I saw. And it's not separate. It's Lynn and I are built very, very differently. Lynn is not an international travel. I'll go anywhere. You know what I mean? And so you either look and you say, well, how do you compromise to find that in between? Or we've just been able to find spiritually that we're united even when we're far apart, because every time we talk, we're talking about what we share together. And this thing with Abigail was just a unique time that we could do it together. And the whole hospital was brokenhearted over this little girl. So doctors would come in and visit and wanted to see. And the doctor that performed pronounced her passed stood, we were just saying this the other day, this beautiful Nigerian man, doctor, and he just stood there after she had passed. And he just stood there for like a good 10 minutes. And we didn't know. And finally he just looked and he said, "Who are you and why?
Why
did you come into this?" And he said, "Are you pastors?" Which is just kind of what everybody thinks, right? And we said, yes and no. We're not pastors, but we are shepherds. And just like you're a shepherd. And we got to pray for this man. We got to pray for nurses. So there's this entry into, as a couple, that we get to minister by standing together in the kingdom. I don't know if that's making sense.
No,
But we're very separate. And like one of the things that happens with couples is like Linda way leans more towards the prophetic. So she'll get words from God. She gets direct verses. And what we've seen couples struggle is I don't. And I can feel less than sometimes. I can feel threatened because I'm supposed to be leading spiritually, but I watch her and I see how she walks with the Spirit. And I do walk with the Spirit, but not in that same way. And we had tension for a while in our lives of saying, okay, what is this supposed to look like? And there is a way as a couple that is we found to embrace each other's spiritual gifting and then lean into that strength. I'm always the leader, but there's times when I lean into Linda's strength because we're in a spiritual part that this is right up her lane. And so imagine the unity of feeling like I'm leaning into you right now. And she just takes it and runs with it. She still looks for my leadership, but it's not always coming under me. There's sometimes she's just stronger than I am. And so finding that has been really cool for us to look and say, whose strength do we lean in this minute? And sometimes it's Linda's.
Yeah, I think sometimes people compare the gifts. I mean, we do it in church, right? We do it in community. Which gift is stronger, which gift is more important in the body, or any of that. And really, at the end of the day, what unifies us more than anything is that we both love saying yes to God. And that is what leads everything. And it doesn't matter how we get there. But, when I got a call about Abigail, would I come down to the hospital and meet with this medical team and talk about this thing? And I couldn't even get my head around what they were asking of me to come down and talk about end-of-life decisions for a critically ill little baby. I was like, well, yes, I'll go. I'll go and figure it out and just listen. And then I call Steve and I say, this is what they've said to me. And he's just like, well, I'm going with you. And that's where we stand on unity.
Yeah.
And the yes is kind of what leads everything, so that we can then say, it doesn't matter that you're bringing this strength or I'm bringing this strength. We're about the kingdom and doing radically whatever it is Jesus is asking us to do.
That's amazing. It gets me excited. It's inspirational.
Yeah.
I think about Abigail, and I think the judge said that now she'll have forever parents.
Yeah.
And another quote I saw was, now it's apparent that she was wanted and known and loved. And I think about the alternative to what that situation could have been. Right. And I'm thankful you guys did that. From the father of a baby myself. Right. It's powerful. One thing you guys talk about how is if your marriage is off, your ministry is limited. And that is so powerful. It's so crucial to if you're married, whatever your mission is, if you can talk about if there's something off at the marriage, it's going to limit what you do.
Yeah, because we really are so connected spiritually that it is like Steve's, analogy of the heart. Like there's blood flow that's not coming into that place spiritually and maritally so that we can go do what God made us to do. And we believe that really the first platform with which we do anything is our marriage. It's not ministry first. It's not even parenting first. It's that we are who we are because of our marriage. We do what we do because of our marriage. It gives us so much credibility and so much authority in our communities and in the church to be who God created us both to be. And it's a mystery because it's like there's the individual part of that, who we are and how we manifest the gifts in our lives, or who we are as a couple. But I just feel like I know that I am fully flowing and hearing from God to do what He's called me to do when Steve and I are right.
And on a really practical basis, you guys have all been around. Look, the fact is, people don't know a lot of great marriages. They don't. If you ask people, the sad thing is, I was telling Andrew before we started this, is that one of the biggest things we've been able to do is talking to people and watch tears come into their eyes when we're saying that marriage is great, and they literally will say, we don't hear that. We hear marriage is okay, we hear it's good, but so they don't see great marriages. So one, think about it. Anything time you have something that is very, very unique, it gives you a platform. So if you have a great marriage, second is you can't fake it. You and I, we've all been around marriages that you will watch a facade, and then when you're in them socially and you watch cutting remarks, you watch insulting shortness with each other, and you look and you go, you know it's not right. And I don't care how you think about that person, it impacts whatever, if I'm short with her and I'm demeaning her and I'm doing that, and then I step up on a stage and preach a great message, you're looking and going, what is that about? So it undermines, it underpins everything that we have. And one of the greatest things, and I don't know if you guys, the couples you hang around with, but I remember as a young guy, one of the things that I realized is I need Linda to think the world of me. That's the most important thing for me as a man is, and I've watched as a young person, I was just watching women walk in and say about their husbands, why don't you dress like him? Why can't you act more like him? Look at what Joe did. How come you can't do that? Linda has never done that to me once. Not once in our entire marriage. And anytime I see a wife do that, I just look and I say, don't do that. You have no idea. Even if you're upset with them, wait till you're at home in your bedroom. But out in public, your husband is looking, and he needs to know that if you had to choose all over again, you'd choose him. And I watch, and so I look and I say, that tells me a lot about a marriage to be able to say, because that tells me you guys haven't talked close enough to know. Like Linda knows that what I need most, my most secure thing in the world is how does she look at me? It's even more important than the sex. It's more important than anything. It's just do you admire me? Do you respect me? And if you don't, I'm in trouble. It doesn't matter what else is going right. And that's the other platform that it builds up, is that I can be out in the business world, and if my marriage, if Lynn and I are struggling, I feel it everywhere. I'm not saying I can't operate, but I am not operating in the time that when we're strong. Does that answer your question?
100%. Yeah. Would you say that the core behind that, you feel it everywhere because this is the person that you've shared most with, and so if you don't get the affirmation, as much as we don't try to get affirmation from each other, it's definitely a part of the equation. I feel like that it undermines your self-confidence of like, oh yeah, well, if she doesn't love me, she knows most about me, then these people won't, and I'm giving them my best face or my best image.
For sure. And life is hard. Relationships are hard. Work is hard. Ministry is hard. Church is hard. And I think, but if I can leave this and feel like he is so for me, and I just feel full. I mean, that goes to another term we use in our marriage encounter is, if my cup is full from Steve, I can go pour out all day long, like this endless well of everything I need to give everywhere else, as a mom, as a daughter, as a sister, as an in-law, as a friend. And I don't mean that to sound like he's, my everything in that, but like it starts with the companionship that we have, like what you're referring to, being so known and comfortable there. That Steve fills my cup like no one else in this world can, because I chose him and he chose me, and God crafted marriage to be a covenant that would be that place like an intimate place of something that we get something from each other that no one else can give us.
And I think that men in particular, I meet with men all the time that are totally confused. And I was confused. They're confusing their sexuality, their sexual desires with what God has built in them to be looked at as a man. And so sometimes, and that's one of our topics, is to be able to say, I met just in the last month, I'll bet you a bunch of guys that are so confused because one of the other tension points is sex, is making love, and frustration. Even when you are doing great together, even when our physical relationship was great, we still had all kinds of tension about frequency, who initiates, all of that. Yeah. It's because we were confused. I was confused. And I think men are confused to say, like the Book of Solomon, it says that it shows this picture of a man just saying, I want my woman to look at me and say, if I choose anyone, it would be you. And that is even more important than the physical. The problem is that sometimes we've connected that the only time I feel that way is when I'm having sex, and that doesn't fill your cup. I mean, one of the discoveries that we had is just to say, if I initiate all the time, and again, this is going into another topic, but I just want to say one of the confusing things, this would take another hour, but why was I frustrated? Because I love being with my wife. Why was I frustrated if I initiated? If I'm only about the physical, then why do I care who initiates? Well, I care who initiates because if I initiate all the time, I still get the physical. But what I need is to feel like my wife wants to be with me. And so we're raised to believe that men are physical and women are emotional, and the best thing you can do is compromise in between. That's not true. I found out I had to move towards, my cup was filled by not just the physical, but by the desire that she has for me, the respect she has. And so men are chasing it in the wrong way, and they're so confused, and they're going over here. And when you unite those two things, the intimacy and the union and the emotion, then it's lights out. Physically, it improves everything. Yeah. Our physical life is better now than it's ever been. And it's because of the lack of confusion and the understanding and the role that we play for one another.
Which takes a ton of communication.
There's one story, I think it was when you were pregnant, and on that concept of filling your cup.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, you would leave Linda and she would be upset, and you're like, well, I just was with her all the time. You sat down with a mentor.
Yeah.
And he said, if she wants you to be with her, you need to be with her. And your response was like, well, then I'm never going to leave because she always wants me back. And
Same.
I felt that, I feel that so deeply. And it's like, it's so important, but it's that willingness to serve of like, okay, she needs this. And trying to address that issue before moving on is so important. Again, could be another hour.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about another. Oh, Nash, hello.
Hi.
Nash is joining
Nash.
us today. Another pivotal thing I think in your marriage that's helped you pursue your ministry, you pursue your ministry. That's a hard series of words to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sure was.
Pursue your ministry.
Pursue your ministry. Is the financial restraints that you've put on your careers and your lives. I would love to hear more about that.
Well, I think the best way to talk about that would be to say the blessing of it. And yet I didn't have the forward thinking that Steve did because he's more a planner than I am. But years and years and years ago, just looking at our lifestyle and our income and the success of Steve's business and deciding to cap our income and say, we're going to we live a very nice lifestyle, live on a certain amount of money, and then we want to give the rest away. And then the way that ended up manifesting itself into, well, we can't always give it all away. We don't always have a place to put it or, give it that year. So determining, that, Steve had just this thought, like if we build a foundation and we put money away there, then we can cap our income, live on what we feel is just such a blessing from the Lord. And that, I don't know when we did that, Steve.
Almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Wow.
But the way that ended up manifesting itself, which you and I talked about with He Knows Your Name, was just that when the Lord brought me this ministry, I have not had to fundraise at all. So for 11 years, I've not once had to go and ask anyone for money, fundraise, have an event, or anything around that. And the freedom that has given me to just do the work that God has called me to do, because we have this foundation that funds everything that I do for He Knows Your Name, has been an incredible blessing. And I could never take any credit for having thought that much forward for that, because Steve really led us in that direction fully. So what do you want to say about that?
Well, in terms of but Linda's more generous, more naturally generous than I was. I was captured by money. I was a slave to money. So part of my action was I realized when I started making money, I went and saw 3 men, all 3 Christians, and I interviewed them just to say, because it's kind of the way I roll. And I said, how'd it go? And one of them was the most pitiful conversation I've ever seen in my life, because he had about 15 years of fantastic abundance, but the last 3 years had been really bad, and all he could talk about was the last 3 years and how God had forsaken him. And I looked and I walked away. I was like, we'll be that person. If we're living to our means all the time, and then God cuts off the faucets, we're gonna be panicked and we're gonna look. So we went home, sat on our porch, and I said, how do we live a life so that if God stops it, we can look and say, thanks for the great ride? Because I saw gratitude is joy. And if
Definitely.
my gratitude's stolen, and this man's gratitude had been stolen, he couldn't see the 15 great years. He could only see the 3 bad. And so one was protection of that. Second is I was mastered by money. So I needed to do something dramatic. And Linda was awesome, generous. And her first response was, why can't we just give it as it comes in? And I said, because we won't. We'll spend it, and then it won't be there. Much.
And it won't be there. Yeah.
And so it just set a lifestyle. But to affirm Linda, I had a very successful business. I don't know many women that would have cut lifestyle. The lifestyle Linda could live. I just don't know. I have to affirm her saying, I just don't know that many that would say, okay, we'll do this. Because she could have had a lot more. But I do want to roll. So then we start the foundation, and just to kind of affirm God's response to this. So we did this, and it had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of scary times, because at one time I was almost losing my business, and I was like, what did we do? Yeah. Because it was gone. And, but so when He Knows Your Name started, we had to start a second foundation, and the lawyer and my attorney said, why don't we just roll it into the first foundation rather than start them? I said, okay, great. Well, to do that, we have to review all the money you've given. We have to go back through this, blah, blah, blah. So we did this. And Lynn and I had one of the most sweetest times, because for the first time,
we hadn't even looked back or counted anything.
We did not know how much we'd given it. And
we had no idea.
And I can say this because it's actually published in another book, so it's already out there. And we looked and we were like, holy cow. This is how much money we've given away. And we've given away more than we've kept. And so we looked at this number, and I went home to Linda, and we sat at a table, and I said, I have 3 questions. I said, 1, if we had all this money back right now, how would it change our life? And she and I couldn't come up with one thing that we felt like we missed. And then we looked at each other and said, now think of the people and the things that would not be in our life had we not given this.
Yeah, for sure.
And we both wept. And the first question is, now, if God had said when we cut the line, this is how much you're going to give away, what would we have said?
No way. Yeah.
And so it's one of those God things of just looking and saying, we would have said, no way. We had a good heart, but if he would have said, this is how much, and this is what's going to happen, we would have said, not doing it.
Yeah.
But the very thing we would have said no to him turned out to be our biggest blessing. And I would say in our lives, that's what we live with, knowing that often the thing we want to say no to is going to be the thing that God's going to just rock us with. And so that's kind of where we went into with Abigail. of going, we didn't want to hold a baby as she died. It was heartbreaking. It really took us to a hard place.
Taking a baby off life support.
But she changed our lives.
Was the hardest and the best thing we have done together. Someone said it's a beautiful, terrible.
Yeah. I'd be curious, does the weight of your ministry ever affect your home life, your relationship? It's the most beautiful ministry ever.
Thank you.
But that's a weight you have to carry around forever.
Yeah. And the grief after Abigail together was really, really hard to walk through together. And there have been things that have been really hard. And I will say, God has equipped me and qualified me to do this work too. And I don't even understand all that. But a lot of times people say, do you just cry all the time? 24 funerals, right? You cry all the time. And I have to say that the mystery of the Holy Spirit in this for me is that he's given me an incredible joy to do it. And because it's a joy and a sorrow, but like to think that like a baby, like you mentioned Amelia earlier, is found by a hiker at a park in Indianapolis, left to die, in the dirt. And she was found. She was named. She has a legacy. And we got to celebrate her life.
What's her like? Can you tell about the footprints?
Yeah. But it's like that joy really for me overtakes the sorrow most of the time, for sure. And it's just a mystery. It just is. Yeah. But her legacy is that her footprint is on the Safe Haven baby box, which is now in 5 states and saving babies' lives. And babies put in that box, rescued anonymously under the Safe Haven law, are adopted within 30 days. And so moms in crisis have an option. So instead of just maybe giving birth at a park alone somewhere and leaving a baby to die, a mom now is educated about the Safe Haven law, and she can choose to put her baby in a box. And these babies are wrapped in sweatshirts or nothing, placenta and all, put in these Safe Haven baby boxes. And so we know that those moms are desperate.
You want to do the questions?
Okay. Does that mean our time's up? Okay, we asked the same 3 questions to every couple. Lighthearted and fun.
Great.
But you have to choose who goes first without knowing the questions.
Linda goes first.
Okay.
How do you like that for gallantry?
Yes. So, first question we always ask, because it's fascinating to see the answers, is what's your biggest pet peeve with one another? Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, gosh.
That's awesome.
One?
Great question.
Steve's nervous.
Yeah, one. Linda says one, only one.
Okay, the thing I've been griping about lately to him, I'll just pick that, is that he leaves his coffee mug on the counter with every morning he has peanut butter on a bagel or something.
Yum.
And I'm not a coffee drinker, so I, have the coffee mug and the peanut butter knife on the counter every morning.
Wow.
To clean up after.
It's
my
not
thing.
bad.
It's not that bad, but that's my thing. I come down and I'm like, peanut butter and coffee.
Yeah.
Not my favorite smells in the morning.
Yeah, I would get that.
Yeah.
Okay, now you.
Mine definitely is Linda's. We have very different communication styles.
Okay.
And that is so frustrating to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a succinct communicator. Linda's an around, and that is just... And it's judgmental of me, but man, is it frustrating. So that's my pet peeve.
It makes me think of the comedy skit. Is that what you're thinking? We went to a comedy show the other night, and this guy was talking about how he asked his wife what time she's leaving. Like, she was flying out. He said, "What time are you leaving?" She said noon, and he was like, "Honey, you're still at home. It's 11:30." And she's like, "Oh, well, that's what time I'm leaving for the airport." He was like, who answers a question like that? Like tell me what I need to know. Like, what do you think I wanted? Anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like that's it.
Okay, part 2 of the question. So now you have to go first.
All right.
Is what do you love the most about your wife?
Oh, that's easy. She is the most devoted person I've ever known in my life. And she's the most devoted to everybody that she's devoted to. She's just equally, I just watch her dive in with people. That's easy. The most devoted person I've ever seen. Yeah.
And what do you love most about your husband?
I'm going to say his smile and sense of humor, because we were talking earlier about how we met in high school. And when I met him at the library, he made me laugh. And Steve making me laugh is how I know we're doing really well. And I love his smile, and I love when he makes me laugh.
You do have a great smile.
Thanks.
You do have a great smile.
You guys have shared so much wonderful wisdom. It was really cool to see the pride that you guys had in the giving, and you talking about how much you've, tried to make that a priority in your relationship. And it's like, that's the type of pride I want to have, that it doesn't come from buying a different car or these different things. You don't get that pride.
Right.
And it's really, really inspiring. If you listening want to find out more about Steve and Linda and the things they have going, including He Knows Your Name, you want to hear more about their marriage advice and their marriage encounter series, we'll include the links down below. But I appreciate you two taking the time to join us, and I hope you have safe travels back home. What?
You have to ask him the third question.
My bad.
Wow.
okay. If you could
this is always his the big question.
If you could summarize all this wonderful experience, this wealth of wisdom that you have, and give one piece of marriage advice, either that you've received or that you've learned from experience, what would you share?
That one's easy for me, is that I fought monogamy and the beauty and the growth and the purity and the wonder of monogamy is the biggest testament to God, because I feel like if there's anything in the world that says one person can't fulfill you, one person's never enough, that's the narrative of the world. And yet I am finding the exact opposite, that God knew us better than we knew ourselves, and he knew that monogamy, and it just keeps getting better and better. So I am continually amazed that monogamy and the purity of marriage is where it's actually at. It's not just a trade-off. It is the only place we can be fulfilled. So that's mine.
Okay, what was your question again?
Best piece of advice you've been given or you would give?
The best piece of advice, probably from my husband to me, is to trust him and let him lead us in places that I know are best for us. Like, I think of the times that I've had to just kind of put myself aside and let Steve fill my cup with his love for me, his adoration of me, his loyalty to us, and let my feelings be put aside and let him just pour into me. So he knows me better than I know myself most times.
Wow. This was great, guys. This was
fun for us.
I've just been absorbing so much stuff.
I don't think I asked any questions. I'm just like,
yeah. Anyway, we really appreciate you guys joining us.
Thank you.
You guys
This
are
was
wonderful.
a joy. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're gracious.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you guys. And Drew's beautiful.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, she never made an appearance.
I know. She still
She's
sleeps
still sleeping.
miraculously.
Yeah.
Good. Sweet.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thank- we
absolutely.
all-
Yeah.